morning and welcome to another episode of Charlotte County's Virtual History, focusing on our local history here in Charlotte County. And behind me here, this lovely view, we are standing on the banks of what is Charlotte Harbor, kind of where the Peace River and Charlotte Harbor come together, where they meet. And then over here to my right, down that way, that would be the entrance to Charlotte Harbor and the Gulf of Mexico. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, with the centennial officially underway, we are going to ask ourselves, how did we get here, right? And although this is a complicated question and it covers hundreds of years of history, I'm going to try to shrink that down for you and cover it in 5 to 10 minutes or so. And why am I doing this? I think it's important for us to understand as we celebrate the centennial, as we commemorate the centennial, to understand that Charlotte County, although only politically an entity since 1921, has a very long-standing history and is very important to the overall history of Southwest Florida and to the Gulf Coast in general. All right, so let's get going in our quick timeline here. So what I want to do is just trace kind of the overall occupation or ownership, if you will, of Florida prior to the United States, and then we'll tackle U.S. territorial and statehood and move ourselves forward. All right, so everything kind of really kicks off in the early 16th century. This is the age of exploration, right? You have Spanish, French, Dutch, Portuguese explorers traveling throughout the globe and discovering new areas, right? And here in the early 16th century, the Spanish will be the first to discover what is now the state of Florida, right? La Florida, right? And it gets this name because of the time of year, right? It was around Easter, the Festival of Flowers, I believe is the rough translation, right? And so the Spanish will be the first to arrive, and there will be actually several Spanish explorations over several decades. Again, all in the 16th century. This is the 1500s, right? Just to make sure we're all on the same page. So we've got people like Ponce de Leon, Hernando de Soto, Aviles, right? All of these folks, and they're all traveling, traversing, exploring Florida, exploring the Gulf Coast, right? And claiming this land for Spain. Now, Spain is actually going to control Florida until 1763. So we're talking a great period of time. In 1763, at the end of the French and Indian War, Spain, which had sided against Great Britain in that conflict, is going to lose control of Florida, but it is going to gain back the possession of Cuba, which it had lost. So, right, it's a trade-off, and they feel Cuba is more valuable than Florida. So 1763, Spain gives Florida to Great Britain, and the very brief period of British occupation of Florida begins. And this is only going to last 20 years, from the end of the French and Indian War through the end of the Revolutionary War. And this is the period of time when Florida is broken up into East and West Florida, what is now Charlotte County, and the whole Gulf side of Florida, or at least the Gulf side as far north as until you get to the Panhandle cut. That is all East Florida, the territory of East Florida. In 1783, after the end of the Revolutionary War, Florida reverts back to Spain, right? Spain had sided on with the Americans during the American Revolution again, so you have this trade-off here. So we've got Spanish, British, now Spanish once again, and this second phase of Spanish occupation of Florida will last until 1821, when Spain, through a treaty with the United States, will grant Florida, or give Florida, to the United States. And so Florida, East and West Florida, become a territory of the United States. And it will be a territory until 1845, when Florida, now not East-West Florida, but just Florida, is going to become the 27th state in the Union. Again, 1845. At the time, there are 2 counties in Florida. This is going to quickly change. You do have a small period of growth in Florida between 1845 and the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861. But this is mostly in northern Florida, right? You have folks coming from Georgia, from Alabama, from South Carolina, migrating down into Florida because there is so much available land. Now, what about here? What's going on over here with Charlotte Harbor? Now, Charlotte Harbor, and it has different names throughout all those different periods of occupation that I talked about, but Charlotte Harbor does appear on maps from the late 16th, early 17th century. Again, many different names. One of the most common that we see is the Bahia de Carlos, right? And this, under the British occupation, becomes Charlotte Harbor, Charlotte being the wife, queen of King George III. And that name is going to stick then moving forward, right? So when Florida becomes a state in 1845, Charlotte Harbor has been mapped, right? This area is very sparsely settled, and I think that's being a little generous, right? Really what you see here are Cuban fishermen, rancheros, and some pioneers, some movement during the Seminole Wars of the 1830s, 40s, and 50s, right? But there is nothing permanent. There is no settlement. This is really just a vast wilderness. And as of 1855, it is part of Manatee County. Now, when the Civil War breaks out in 1861, there's going to be a little bit more activity here. Charlotte Harbor is one of the areas of interest for the Union Navy during the Civil War. And if you had tuned into my Civil War program a few months back, we talked about the importance of Charlotte Harbor in addition to Tampa and other harbors in that conflict. So I won't go into too much more here, but just as a refresher, right, this is an access point for goods coming out of Florida, right, during with the Union blockade, right, where you have Confederates in Florida trying to break through the Union blockade. Charlotte Harbor is one of those points, though it's certainly not on the same level of importance as, say, Tampa or even places in the Panhandle like Pensacola, right? But it is still there, and this is still a guarded area by the blockade, right? But there's still no settlement here, right? So again, although Charlotte Harbor is important as a body of water, but there is not settlement here. Now, this is going to change in 1865 with the end of the Civil War, right? So the war ends, and what you have, some of the earliest folks that are going to settle here, some of those earliest pioneers to what is now Charlotte County, were members of the Union Army and or Navy, right? Nathan DeCoster, for example, who is going to play a role in the foundation of Hickory Bluff, right? Which kind of over time becomes Charlotte Harbor, the town of Charlotte Harbor, not the body of water, right? By the 1870s, you also have small, and I do mean very small, settlements popping up in Inglewood, the Goff family, right? You have Charlotte Harbor, Hickory Bluff, as I mentioned, Punta Gorda eventually by the 1880s. So in these couple decades after the Civil War, that is when you first start to see this real settlement of what is Charlotte County, right? So we have all of this long history before, say, 1865, 1870, right? Where Charlotte Harbor was important to some degree for different people for different reasons, right? But it was the body of water that was important. It was the harbor that was important. It was not this landscape, right? This land was still a wilderness. But that, again, that changes after the Civil War. And what is really going to drive this, especially by the 1880s, is the railroad, right? And I think I've stated this in a couple of my programs before, but we really cannot underestimate the importance of the railroad in driving settlement to what is now Charlotte County. Now, 1887, what is now Charlotte County becomes part of DeSoto County, right? And I think it's so fascinating. For those of you that are interested in maps and county lines and how things change, I would highly recommend that you go to Florida Memory. This is run by the State Archives. It's an online database, and they have a very wonderful map collection. And you can go through and browse by coverage, by period in time. And so you can look at maps from all those different periods, the first Spanish period, the British period, second Spanish, territorial, statehood, and all the way down. And it's so fascinating to see how those lines change and what is Charlotte Harbor and what is now Charlotte County, and all the different places and all the different entities that they've been a part of, right? So 1887, DeSoto County, the railroad is here, you have increased settlement, people are coming here, right? There is tons of land available in Florida, and the harbor is a driving force, right? Fishing, right? There's industrial possibility here. And so even though Charlotte County is not a political entity until 1921, all of these pieces of the puzzle that are put in place after the Civil War specifically, so 1865 to say 1900, right? All of those pieces, those are all critical pieces that help set the foundation for the success that Charlotte County is going to enjoy once it becomes its own political entity, right? And it is also this success and also this increase in settlement, as small as it may be comparatively to what we think of after World War II, right? That is also going to help drive the motion to create a new county, right? Because DeSoto County at the time is very large, right? What was DeSoto County in the 1880s, 1890s, early 20th century now encompasses 4 other separate counties outside of DeSoto, right? So just to give you a scale, and again, go to Florida Memory and check out those maps, because that will really help you understand how large an area this was, right? And how increased settlement along the Gulf Coast around Charlotte Harbor is going to push people to say, you know what? We need a new county, right? This is for practical reasons. This is for political reasons. More counties means more representation in the state legislature, right? And folks in South Florida want that participation, right? Florida politics is driven by North and Central Florida, because that's where the majority of the counties are, right? If there can be more counties in South Florida, well, then that just means more representation and of course, more political benefit, right? And so all of these things come together, and we've talked about the divisionist movement, right? And how you have countless pushes to create a separate county, which finally come to fruition in the election of 1920, where you have pro-divisionist electors picked for the state legislature, and they're able to bring that to a vote and are able to be successful. And then Charlotte County is created officially on April 23rd, 1921. And we're so close to that date. And before we wrap up today, just a couple things that I want to remind you of what we have coming, so that you can keep tuning in and keep learning more about our history during this very important celebration. So in addition to our regular programs, both the ones that I do, but then my program coordinator, Crystal Diff, and all of the Libraries and History Division, we are putting out a lot of material, great stuff for you to learn and engage with the history of our very diverse and interesting county that we have here. So I would highly encourage you to follow us on our YouTube channel. I would also recommend that you take a look into the resources that we have available. I know I mentioned Florida Memory, and that's not, of course, our resource particularly, but it is a fantastic state resource that I think everyone would enjoy. We also have our online archival collection, which is available through the library catalog, where you can see over 4,000 images from across Charlotte County's history. In addition to that, I'm very excited. We have a centennial exhibit on display at the Punta Gorda Charlotte, the Inglewood Charlotte, and the Mid-County Regional Library. Please check those out as well. And soon, I believe in the next month or so, we will be having the arrival of the original, it's a scanned copy, but the original legislation, the 1921 legislation that created Charlotte County, and that will be on display as well for everyone to see. And you'll be able to see all the signatures, including Governor Carey Hardee, who is the final signature, right, the final sign-off on April 23rd, 1921 to create Charlotte County. So lots out there, lots more to come, so please tune in. And once again, thank you so much for joining us as always, and we look forward to